Greetings, campers. Welcome to episode 29. And for tonight's campfire story, we're going to be discussing the Grand Canyon, one of America's most popular places to explore. The Grand Canyon is a national park located in Arizona and stretches across 278 miles, or 447 kilometers of the Colorado River. The canyon is a mile deep. It is open 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. However, that is the south rim. The Grand Canyon has a south rim and a north rim. Now, the north rim is seasonal and is only open from May 16th to the end of November. This includes all vehicles, including snowmobiles. So always check their webpage to confirm the final date. But winter camping is available in the North Rim as long as you have a backcountry permit. And you can obtain these permits through the South Rim Backcountry Information Center webpage. And just to briefly explain a little bit, the North Rim reaches over 8,000 feet in elevation. It has one lodge inside the park, aptly named Grand Canyon Lodge. P.S. It's a good idea to make a reservation if you plan to stay at this lodge. It is the only one, so spots do fill fast. And if you're thinking of going from the North Rim to the South Rim, just keep in mind it takes about 4.5 hours to get there. That's about 220 miles. Now, the South Rim has a bit more to offer in terms of places to stay. They have the Grand Canyon Village and the Desert View. Making a reservation is always wise when staying at these places to make sure you have a place to rest your head. But there are plenty of camping options available as well, not to mention restaurants, grocery stores, and even shuttle buses at specific locations. Whether it's the North Rim or the South Rim, make sure to check their websites before heading out. Check the weather conditions, check the status of the trails, and your camping preferences. Make sure they're available. Oh, and always check the wildlife situation. And when you make your choice, don't forget to check out the ghosts. Oh yeah, you can't have a place like the Grand Canyon without some spooky history. Our first documentations of ghosts go back to when the Spanish first explored the area. That doesn't mean there are older legends that were handed down by story, but let's start with the written accounts first. I did an episode on the ladies in white, and wouldn't you know it, the North Rim of the Grand Canyon has its own lady. She is more commonly referred to as the Wandering Woman. Classically dressed in white, but she has chosen to accessorize with blue flowers. Her chosen haunt is a trail called the Transept Trail. Now, a little snippet about this trail camper. It is 2 miles, about 100 feet in elevation. It takes about 1 to 2 hours, unless you're like me and want to stop to look at all the moss, trees, frogs, squirrels, anything else that might catch my attention, which is to say everything. Now, the trail travels along the side of the canyon. You get to see this trail from the North Rim campground as well as the Backcountry Info Center. The Wandering Woman is most often seen at night, so take your flashlights. No one has been able to determine just why she cries, and because she sticks to the trails, some believe that she died either on the trail or close to the lodge. This, of course, is not verifiable, as no one knows for sure who she was. But the most common theory is that she was either lost on the trail and looking for her family, her husband, or maybe it's vice versa. She was maybe looking for her lost loved ones and perished in the search. And just like in my previous post about the ladies in white, the fact that this wandering woman is wearing white, well, it denotes, I believe, her virtue and probably her faithfulness due to the time period in which she is perceived to have lived. which the earliest documentation is about 1932, September 1st to be exact. Now the blue flowers. The color blue, depending on your nationality, can represent peace, loyalty, and calmness. Are the blue flowers a way for her to show her loyalty, perhaps to those she lost? Or is it a commitment to continue the search even after death? There are a number of flowers that can be found along the Grand Canyon's north rim. One is a blue flower called blue phlox, with the Latin name Linum lewisi. It is a very dainty flower with light blue petals. Interestingly, the indigenous peoples would eat these petals for their nutritional value. Maybe our wandering woman saw the flowers during her search for her loved ones. Maybe these were the last things she saw at the moment of her death. With the Grand Canyon being as big as it is, the wandering woman is not the only legend of a person having gone missing. At the last count, 900 people have gone missing at the Grand Canyon. Actually, I should say 900 that we know of. And that number fluctuates depending on who and when, while the majority of deaths are the result of falling off cliffs, environmental causes, drowning in airplane and helicopter crashes. There are still others who die in worse ways. The Wandering Woman is by far the most popular ghost of the Grand Canyon, but there are also many sightings of ghostly miners. Those men filled with the gold fever who risked their lives for that sparkly rock. Filled with an illogical sense of superiority, these men trekked out into the lands of the Grand Canyon without concern of weather conditions or even where they were exactly trekking to, believing that if they just swung their axe in the perfect spot, all their dreams would come true. Sadly, for those who died out there in the desert heat, alone with their thoughts and unquenchable thirst, I have to imagine some who died still died with that same desire for gold, a desire that death did not bring an end to. In 1850, a 15-year-old man by the name of Fred Harvey immigrated to the U.S. Mr. Harvey was a man with a plan. An entrepreneur at heart, after witnessing the horrible food and food service conditions for railroad passengers, he started the very first restaurant chain in the United States. He partnered with the Santa Fe Railroad and created restaurants and hotels along the railroads for passengers. He would enlist girls called Harvey Girls as hostesses. This initiative by an immigrant led to 65 restaurants, lunch counters, about 60 dining cars, and 12 hotels going from Chicago, Illinois, west to the Pacific and south to the Gulf of Mexico. Sadly, when interstate highways and air flight took over, the Harvey houses lost their income and had completely closed down in 1957. But Mr. Harvey left his mark. He built something never heard or seen of before. As an immigrant from London and a child of only 15, now he is known as the father of the American service industry. And it seems Mr. Harvey loved his work, loved it so much that even after his death, due to intestinal cancer, February 9th of 1901 in Leavenworth, Kansas, that love did not die. Travelers still see the ghosts of Mr. Harvey along the South Rim in El Torvo, as well as hotels. You'll know it's him with his long coat and distinguished tall black hat. Don't worry, though, he is not vengeful. Mr. Harvey just enjoys seeing the beauty of that which he had created. And if you're interested in learning more, there is actually a museum devoted to Mr. Harvey in Leavenworth, Kansas. Another mysterious disappearance is that of Glenn and Bessie Hyde. The Hydes, Glenn and Bessie, were newlyweds. Aww. they got married in 1928, and they chose to have their honeymoon at the Grand Canyon. A honeymoon in the Grand Canyon does kind of sound enticing, doesn't it? That was Glenn and Bessie's thought too. In fact, these adventurers decided that part of their honeymoon would be to run the rapids of the Colorado River. Glenn was a boat builder, and he decided he wanted to set the record for the top speed while traveling through the Colorado River. Now, to make it even more memorable, Bessie would also run the river, and she would become the first woman to do so. Now that is something, isn't it? You decide to spend the rest of your life with someone, you pick an awesome destination, and plan to make it a memory for yourselves as well as the world. Well, you would think that was something. Sadly, Glenn nor Bessie finished their boating adventure. I mean, they started. Then they disappeared. And once people started to learn who Glenn and Bessie were, well, their tale might not be as much of a fairy tale as one would think. You tell me. The newlyweds met on a passenger ship in 1927 while traveling to Los Angeles. They got married April 12th, 1928. So just nearly a year after these two strangers met, they decided marriage was a great idea. And, maybe it works out for some, but for the majority of us, you don't really know a person in just barely under a year. Now, like I said, Glenn was a boat builder. He was considered by some to be an expert boat builder. So him building this boat was no big surprise. Bessie, though, was best described as a bohemian, free spirit at heart. She was an aspiring artist when she met Glenn. So it would make sense that Glenn would want to use one of his personally made boats to cruise down the Colorado River. And Bessie, being the boho chick, she should be down for the ride too, right? However, this was 1928. Getting through the rapids of the Grand Canyon was not to be done by amateurs. Neither Bessie nor Glenn had ever flown down or traveled down this river before. Now, these rapids are serious. They should not be taken lightly. And again, back in the 1920s, there was no such thing as first responders. So if you got hurt or something happened to you, you were SOL, as in shit out of luck. With that being said, Bessie and Glenn hit the waters October 20th, 1928, without life preservers. But they did have food and clothing, and Bessie took her diary. The newlyweds estimated they would complete their journey in about a month and a half, and in all accounts, the first half of their trip seemed to really go off without a hitch. In fact, they were doing so well that they decided to take a few days off at the Grand Canyon Village at the South Rim to restock and have a bit of R&R. This would have been around November 16th. And at that time, they took time to sit and chat with a reporter from the Denver Post who happened to be there. Then, while on a hike, they met the Kolb brothers, Ellsworth and Emery. The Kolb brothers were famous photographers with a studio, and they took a photo of Glenn and Bessie with the expectations that Glenn and Bessie would come back to collect the picture after they completed their trip. Remember when I said that the couple didn't take life preservers? Well, I want to include that because even at that time, back in the 1920s, anyone who didn't respect the rapids were looked at with concern. So when the Kolb brothers realized that Glenn and Bessie did not have life preservers, it was actually Emery who pointed out just how dangerous that could be and even offered them, Glenn and Bessie, some of their own life preservers because anything could happen. Sadly, Glenn declined this with a laugh, and he said that these two, they could swim anything. However, Emery remembered that Bessie seemed nervous. And then later, something interesting happened. Before Glenn and Bessie left, Emery's daughter came for a visit. While noticing just how beautiful Emery's daughter was, Bessie said aloud, "I wonder if I shall ever wear pretty shoes again." Now that's an odd thing to say. Why wouldn't she wear pretty shoes? Why wouldn't she have the chance to get dressed up? This is quite a strange thing to say. Later, when other people were questioned about the whereabouts of Glenn and Bessie, a number of people said that Bessie voiced that she wanted to leave the trip. She wanted to quit. She didn't like it. And it's these comments that lead some to believe this speedy marriage and speedy trip down the rapids might not have been what Bessie wanted. In fact, some believed that Bessie might have been being abused by Glenn. When December comes about and no one had heard or seen Glenn or Bessie, Emery Kolb started a search for the couple and even requested the assistance of a pilot. On December 20th, 1928, a boat was found and identified as being that one of Glenn Hyde. It was also discovered on the rocks about 15 miles south of Diamond Creek. Now, the thought was that the couple had come ashore. They were probably just waiting nearby. Maybe they needed help. The search party took stock of the boat. They found that it contained everything. Everything that the couple had taken with them. It had food in it. It had clothing. It had books. It had camera. And it had Bessie's journal. This boat was upright. There was no damage to the boat. And there was no signs that it had tipped over, if you catch my meaning. That camera, it did have film in it, and it was later developed. It was determined to be the last photos that the couple had ever taken. The last photo was what is believed to be taken near River Mile 165. And it was estimated that the photo was taken about November 27th, so just a bit over a month from when the boat was found. They also reviewed Bessie's journal. Her last entry was November 30th. She reported that they were near Diamond Creek. As no reason could be found as to why they had abandoned their boat, Glenn's father, Reith Hyde, hired a group of men to search for the couple. Still nothing was found. No body was found. No proof of injury was found. Nothing. After 41 days, the search was called off because there was nothing found. Naturally, it was believed that the couple had fallen into the waters and were swept away. Okay, so both of them? They both fell into the water? From a boat that was not damaged, found intact, and on the shore, full of their supplies? What? If their boat was fine, what would cause two people to jump into the waters? Or if the boat had tipped over and they fell in, wouldn't their supplies and their clothing and their camera have been swept away, have been damaged? Bessie's diary wasn't wet. The camera wasn't damaged. And there was no water found in the boat. Since no reason could be discerned as to why the two had disappeared, many have offered their assumptions. Their guesstimations, if you will. One is that the people remembered how Bessie wanted to end the trip. She wanted to go back. Some think Glenn might have gotten abusive based on this, and maybe he forced her to continue. In a fit of frustration, he kills Bessie because she wants to leave. Now there are others who say maybe Bessie did want to leave, but maybe the roles were reversed. Bessie was sick of Glenn trying to force her on this trip, and she killed him. Whichever one did the killing. The other maybe went into hiding, taking on a different identity. I'm not really feeling it, but I don't know. However, There was a woman who became famous for rafting the Grand Canyon. And she was someone who had some interesting keepsakes that were discovered when she passed away in 1992. Okay, so you tell me what you think about this camper. Georgie Clark was her name, and even though she had friends and acquaintances, not a single one of them had ever been invited into her home. Now, some of these people had known Georgie for over decades, but it wasn't until Georgie's passing that her friends actually entered her home, and they started to, go through things as you do when a friend or a loved one passes. Not in an inappropriate way, but, things need cleaned up. And that's part of what you do when somebody passes. But there were some interesting and slightly sketchy things discovered. First thing that raised some eyebrows was that Georgie had a birth certificate for Bessie DeRoss. Bessie DeRoss was Glenn Hyde's wife. That was Bessie's maiden name. And if that doesn't make you say, well, Georgie's friends then discovered a pistol in her lingerie drawer and the marriage license for Glenn and Bessie Hyde. So before people started going too bonkers with this information, photographs of Bessie and Georgie were compared, and the two really didn't look alike. Not really. So it was then decided that Georgie had gotten her hands on souvenirs of the couple. The gun, a souvenir, the birth certificate, a souvenir, and the marriage license, a souvenir. Georgie never mentioned that she was this, or would have been this enamored with Glenn and Bessie's, tragic endings. It's a little interesting, but I'll tell you what. I'm going to share pictures of Georgie and Bessie on my Instagram. You compare the photos and you tell me, could this be the same person? Maybe a little cosmetic surgery? Or maybe Georgie had this weird fetish with Glenn and Bessie Hyde. Another woman, this woman by the name of Liz Cutler, was sitting by a campfire amongst a group of people, just hanging out by the fire. They had been on a commercial boating trip, but while sitting round the campfire, Liz just blurts out that she's Bessie Hyde. Now, the others sitting around the campfire were, kind of like, what? Okay. But one boatman, George Billingsley, he said, okay, what'd you do with Glenn? Like in a joking way, because he didn't believe her. However, Liz did not miss a beat and replied quite calmly, I killed him. She said they fought. She stabbed him, and then she hiked out to Peach Springs, Arizona. She took a bus back east and just started a brand new life, like, la-di-da. Naturally, she was looked into, and it was discovered that she was actually a psychology professor from Ohio, gulp, who just liked to play mind games. WTF to that. One more oddity to round out this tale is that you remember Emery Kolb, the photographer, the one who warned the couple about the necessity for life preservers, as well as the one who went out looking for them when he realized they'd disappear. Which, side note, I find it just a wee bit odd that a guy you meet once goes to all this trouble to find you, chartering a pilot, starting a search. I mean, it's nice, but it's also like, what? Anyways, a skeleton was found hidden in his garage in 1976. Now, first thought, everybody's like, oh my God, it's Glenn. He shot Glenn. I don't know, maybe he got enamored with Bessie, who knows. But it was determined to be a male. However, it was discovered that Emery and his brother found the remains of this skeleton in the Grand Canyon in like 1933. It's estimated. And the skeleton's actually believed to be somebody else. Early investigations have revealed that the structure of the skeletal remains just didn't match that of Glenn. Now, the identity of the skeleton still remains a mystery. So, if you have any family history of a male relative going out to the Grand Canyon or being out in the Grand Canyon and disappearing, you might want to check it out. People are still even searching for what happened to Glenn and Bessie. Maybe one of them did fall into the river. Maybe one fell into the river, the other one reached out to try and grab him and pull him back in, but they fell in accidentally as well, and the boat was able to stay upright. It's possible. Even though Glenn mentioned just what fabulous swimmers the two were, it's actually been discovered it really doesn't matter how good you can swim. It's been discovered that not fighting the current is your best chance at surviving. In fact, going back on your back, riding out the current is one of the better ways to survive. Now, if both Glenn and Bessie had fallen into the rapids, they may have tried to swim against the current. Glenn does give the air of, I know everything and I know what's best. So I could see how if he had fallen in, and if Bessie had fallen in, he would have tried to fight against the rapids to either get back to the boat or to reach shore, instead of just going through the waves and letting the water take him, hopefully, to calmer waters. That's an idea. Even though if they did do that, even if they tried to ride out the waves, it was the end of November. It's Colorado. Hypothermia would have likely set in way before either of them could have gotten very far. But, okay, so let's say that happens. It is the rapids. How did this boat land so perfectly along the shore? How could it have not gotten tipped over? How could water have not damaged any of the contents inside? There was a journal. No water damage. There was a camera. No water damage. These are rapids. This is a dangerous river. What? And just to let you know, the Grand Canyon is located in Arizona. Okay, so it's hot and it can get dry, can get arid. Not too many people can thrive in it. At least not city folks, with no discernible evidence that they knew how to survive in this type of climate. But proof of life, Camper, has been discovered going all the way back to 1909 by an explorer named G.E. Kincaid. Now, Kincaid was an explorer, not really like Glenn and Bessie, so we're going to put the story of Glenn and Bessie to the side because it's still, today, a mystery. However, in 1909, Mr. Kincaid discovered man-made caves and tunnels throughout the canyon. Have any of you heard of this? Man-made caves and tunnels. What was even more intriguing were the artifacts left there by those early people. Suspicion and mystery has surrounded these artifacts. There was an article published in 1909 by an anonymous writer from the Arizona Gazette. The article states that G.E. Kincaid took an archaeologist from the Smithsonian by the name of S.A. Jordan to witness and document his discoveries. interesting that everybody has initials, but okay, I'll put that to the side. However, representatives from the Smithsonian deny that this ever happened. They deny the existence of a Jordan or of a Kincaid. Okay, that's not suspicious at all. Since the Arizona Gazette was the only newspaper to release this story, and the fact that the author chose to remain anonymous leads people to believe that, you know what, this might be false. We have an anonymous writer, it's one article in one newspaper, and the people that it's about, all you have are initials. Oh, and the Smithsonian said, nah, it didn't happen. But many people have learned to take what government officials say with a grain of salt. Some of the discoveries noted in the article include very interesting artifacts. Golden urns, tools made of copper, mummies, and hieroglyphs that are oddly reminiscent of Egyptian and Indian culture, not Native American or indigenous to America, but India, the country? How can that be? America and Egypt and India, we're not exactly neighbors. We're a little far away. Roughly 7,542 miles between America and generally Egypt. You also have to kind of cross the Atlantic Ocean as well. But that's okay. Well, so those miles, that's actually via plane. To walk it is a whole lot farther. And it is weird. So there's no documentation found in Egypt that says any group of Egyptians traveled from their homeland to make their way to another land, which, wasn't America at that time, but we do now call America. But it doesn't mean a thing because plenty of people can, just go and take a walk and you'll never know. There are places within the Grand Canyon, though, that have interesting names. So places like Osiris, Isis, Shiva, Horus. There's even a Tower of Set. These are names of gods of Egypt and India. We don't even know why these landmarks were given such specific names. You could say, okay, well, the person who discovered it, was really enamored with Egypt or has Egyptian, was an Egyptian descendant, and that's why they named them. But we don't know who these people are. These names of these locations are just there. And it's very likely that you might not have heard of these names. Why? Why do people not talk about the awesome Osiris location in Grand Canyon? Or the awesome Tower of Set in Grand Canyon? Well, that's because these areas are off limits to the public. That's right. The government has banned any entry to these public areas. Now that's weird. Like, why? There's an area called Hopi Fire Tower, Maricopa Point, and the Hopi Salt Mines, and the Furnace Flats. These are also areas that we don't know where these names came from, and the public is not allowed access to. Now, for those areas that are referred to as quote-unquote mines, they're not really mines. They are caves. These are really interesting names. Who came up with these? These names were actually already in place prior to the article of 1909. So here we have an article from the Arizona Gazette released in 1909 by an anonymous writer, by names of people we don't really have a full name to, we just have last names, describing locations that have these odd Egyptian references. And nobody knows who named these areas. But all of a sudden, the areas are blocked off. In 1987, not too long ago, The US government went one step further and restricted airspace access over the canyon. So you can't walk through it, and now you can't fly over it. Their reasoning is to protect the experience, quote unquote, of the park and to restore the natural quiet. I'm sorry, what? What's natural quiet? If you're in nature, then you should be hearing nature sounds. Nobody goes out to nature to hear nothing. That's interesting. So a quick Google search will tell you that commercial planes fly about 30 to 40,000 feet way up in the air. I don't think that is really going to ruin the natural sound of us on the ground. It's a weird one, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. Have you noticed any disturbance in the natural sound of being in the Grand Canyon? I'd like to know. Please fill me in. Okay, moving on. Skinwalkers. If you don't know, camper, skinwalker is the name given to creatures who used to be men. They were notable medicine men who became consumed with their spiritual abilities, and their abilities led them to doing nasty things. Sometimes power goes to the head of a person. Doesn't matter what your nationality is. Usually, in order to achieve the status of a skinwalker, one would have to kill someone. And it couldn't just be any old one. Legend states that it would have to be someone close to you, a loved one. Now, these medicine men would then use their skills to take on the shapes, or skins, if you will, of different animals. Interestingly, one of the most notable forms is that of the wolf. Think werewolf or dogman. I did a small episode on the dogmen of Michigan. In that episode, I discussed the dogman, but I did not connect the dogman with that of skinwalkers. Maybe there is a connection there. The curse of lycanthropy has different origins depending on your culture, but it's very intriguing that so many of our cultures share some form of shape-shifting lore. Lycanthropy, skinwalkers, werewolves. Interesting. Now, for others, skinwalkers would take forms of other creatures, yet they would still be strong, predatory type creatures. They included coyotes, bears, and foxes. But there does seem to be a definite connection between the indigenous skinwalkers, dogmen of Michigan, and other werewolf / lycanthropothic stories and legends. That was a tough word. The locations of these creatures, these skinwalkers, who travel the spiritual plane, have their hotspots, if you will. Now, obviously, I cannot talk about skinwalkers without discussing Skinwalker Ranch. And Skinwalker Ranch is numero uno in terms of seeing a skinwalker. However, I will leave Skinwalker Ranch to the side for right now because Skinwalker Ranch will get its own episode. I'll tell that tale though. Just at another campfire. With that being said, there are areas within the Grand Canyon, like I said, that has a few hot spots. These hot spots are more like hidey hole hot spots. It's places that make really seeing the skinwalker difficult. It also makes it a difficult area to traverse. Some of the more popular sightings are at Thunder River Trail, and a party of hikers were walking this trail back in the 1990s. They all reported to seeing what they thought at first was human, okay? It had a humanesque form, figure. However, it did not move like a human. We all kind of have a similar motion when we're trekking and hiking and walking. But this creature, it moved more animal-like. It had more fluidity to it, more stealth. In fact, when they watched this creature, this human-y looking thing, as they watched it climb up rocky cliffs, it had a speed that they had never seen before, an agility that just didn't feel human. Other sightings include oddly large footprints that are human-esque shaped, but okay, listen to this. So it's human shaped, and you start following the footprints. As you follow these footprints, and this is reported by a park guard, he saw these footprints, okay? He's following these human footprints. And the park guard states that when he got to a cave, he entered it, following the footprints. These human footprints, they changed to animal footprints mid-stride. So it's like footprint, 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 animal footprint, animal footprint. The human footprints, they disappeared. And animal footprints were right in front of it. Now, I'm sure a lot of the park guides and rangers, I'm sure they like their ghostly tales too, but I'm sure they wouldn't come out and report something that they had seen if it wasn't true. The guards have also shared that in these areas of skinwalker sightings, the wildlife, they act weird. Some of the wildlife don't show fear of human beings at all. They almost act like they're not scared, and they will walk right up to you. But it's only in these skinwalker sighting areas. Interestingly, doppelgangers are also seen along the area of Skinwalker Ranch and also along the area of the Colorado River. Someone, or what seems to be someone you see them off in the distance, and they look exactly like, fill in the blank, Joe Schmo. But then when they speak to that person and they say, "Hey, I saw you on that ridge," that person looks at them like, "What? No, I was over here. I was miles away. I was never there at all." Now, it can happen once in a while, but the repeatedness of these doppelganger sightings on top of one another, it gets to be a little eyebrow raising. Now, if you add that to also reported electrical failures of equipment in these same areas, it leads one to believe something is happening out there. Something is happening. Someone is causing something to happen. It makes you wonder. It leads to, that's why people are going out there. So many stories. Now, the people that were here before us, before white settlers, before the indigenous tribes that fought with the white settlers, there are another ancient people before them, the ancestral Puebloans. And this is a general term. It's what we know to call them. Their stories have stayed with us also. They believe that many spirits dwelled within the Grand Canyon, and I'm going to try and pronounce it. I might have butchered it, so I do apologize, but these ancient peoples referred to these spirits as Kachinas. And these spirits would convey messages from even greater spirits. It's a very complex system of spirituality, and I really find it very fascinating. And just like with many other cultural beliefs and spiritual paths, I think they should be cherished. I think sometimes there's a bit of truth in some of these old spiritual beliefs. and I don't think it should disappear. The Grand Canyon, to me, it's a wonder to behold. It's a beautiful place. And sometimes once you get there, just the views and, I don't know, the air, it kind of shocks you. There's deep valleys, desert lands on one area, snowy mountains on the other, and underneath it all, there's a lot of secrets that have yet to be revealed. If you get the chance to visit either the North or the South Rims, or hell, both rims, you'll be sure to get some amazing views. Well, camper, that's a wrap up for just some of the history and lore of the Grand Canyon. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And I hope you're enjoying the interviews of solo women campers and hikers on my YouTube channel. New interviews will be coming out, but I am still looking for more solo campers and hikers. If you would like to share your story, please send me a message. And I want to say that it's not just solo women, but other minorities. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear your stories and share them. For those who find peace in the green, if you're willing, I would love to share your story so that others can find peace as well. You don't just have to be a solo female. I'm looking for any ethnicity, gay, lesbian, whatever you have. I don't care. If you love the green as much as I do, if you found peace and guidance in the green, let me know. I would love to share it. And for those of you who don't know, back in 2020, I was in the midst of publishing my first novel. I had written it, I had been working with an editor, but then life had other plans, and I got hit with a few curveballs. So I had to put the book on hold. And after some deliberation, I decided I'm going to get back to this book. I'm going to finish it, and I'm going to put it out. I will most likely be releasing chapters on a sister podcast that I will be creating. Right now, these are a series of 4 books, possibly 5. I haven't decided yet. More info will come on this new adventure. But as always, if you would like to be a part of my interviews, like I said, or if you have a ghost story or cryptid story of camping, please send me a message. I would love to share it. You can send me an email to campfireghoststories8@gmail.com. That's campfireghoststories, the number 8@gmail.com. Always get out and ground yourself as much as you can. The green is always here as long as we protect it. Happy camping, and I will see you at the next campfire.